Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Matthew, chapter 26, verses 47 through 68. While he was still speaking, Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests and elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one that I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and took hold of Jesus and arrested him. But one of those with Jesus grabbed his sword, drew it out, and struck the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who take hold of the sword will die by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and that he would send me more than 12 legions of angels right now? How then would the scriptures that say it must happen this way be fulfilled?" At that moment, Jesus said to the crowd, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me like you would an outlaw? Day after day I sat teaching in the temple courts, yet you did not arrest me. But this has happened so that the scriptures of the prophets would be fulfilled." Then all the disciples left him and fled. Now the one who had arrested Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the experts in the law and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him from a distance, all the way to the high priest's courtyard. After going in, he sat with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were trying to find false testimony against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find anything, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, "This man said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'" So the high priest stood up and said to him, "Have you no answer? What is this that they are testifying against you?" But Jesus was silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said it yourself, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." And then the high priest tore his clothes and declared, "He has blasphemed. Why do we need witnesses? Now you have heard the blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He is guilty and deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him with their fists, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy for us, you Christ, who hit you?" Yeah. So you have the betrayal of Jesus here, where Judas comes up and betrays him to the to the guards here, who are armed with swords and clubs. Yeah, so they clearly regarded Jesus as a dangerous man. Yeah. What Judas received payment for was probably information as to where Jesus could be arrested in a quiet setting with little danger of mob violence. Yeah, Judas knew where to find them. Jesus could have easily foiled his plan by choosing a different place for this night, but this was not his intention. Yeah, Jesus shows that he's in command throughout this entire situation. The area he was in was very close to where Jesus could have retreated and been safe from the guards. Jesus could have called on legions of angels to defend himself, and commanded his disciples not to defend him using violence. Yeah, and you can see in a different gospel that they withdrew at the very statement of Jesus withdrawing in divine terror. So Jesus went willingly to the cross. He wasn't taken unawares here. And you had the prayer here immediately preceding this, where he knows exactly what's going to happen here. Take this cup from me, but nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will be done. Those skilled in the Jewish learning tell us that the ordinary guard of the temple belonged to the priests and such officers as they employed, but upon their great festivals the Roman governors added a band of soldiers who yet were under the command of the priests. "Greetings, Rabbi." Judas warmly greeted Jesus, even giving him the customary kiss, but the kiss only precisely identified Jesus to the authorities who came to arrest Jesus. There are no more hollow, hypocritical words in the Bible than "Greetings, Rabbi," in the mouth of Judas. The loving, heartfelt words of Jesus calling Judas friend stand in sharp contrast. The sign of Judas was typical in the way in which Jesus is generally betrayed. When men intend to undermine the inspiration of the Scriptures, how did they begin their books? Why, always with a declaration that they wish to promote the truth of Christ. Christ's name is often slandered by those who make a loud profession of attachment to him, and then sin foully as the chief of transgressors. From Spurgeon. Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. This happened only after they had all fallen to the ground, when Jesus announced himself as the I Am. One of those who were there stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Matthew doesn't tell us, but we know from John 18:10 that the unnamed swordsman was Peter. But how came Peter to have a sword? Judea was at this time so infested with robbers and cutthroats that it was not deemed safe for any person to go unarmed. He probably carried one for his mere personal safety. He will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels. A legion is judged to be 6,000 foot and 700 horse. And this great army of angels is by prayer dispatched from heaven in an instant. The number is impressive, especially considering that one angel killed up to 185,000 soldiers in one night, from 2 Kings 19. Our Lord had thus the means of self-defense, something far more powerful than a sword hung at his girdle, but he refused to employ the power within his reach. His servants could not bear this test. They had no self-restraint. The hand of Peter is on his sword at once. The failure of the servants in this matter seems to me to illustrate the grand self-possession of their master. Jesus was led to Caiaphas. This was not the first appearance of Jesus before a judge or official on the night of his betrayal. On that night, and the day of his crucifixion, Jesus actually stood in trial several times before different judges. Before Jesus came to the home of Caiaphas, he was led to the home of Annas, who was the ex-high priest, and the power behind the throne of the high priest. Where the scribes and elders were assembled, Caiaphas had gathered a group of the Sanhedrin to pass judgment on Jesus. After the break of dawn, the Sanhedrin gathered again, this time in official session, and they conducted the trial described in Luke 22. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council. The nighttime trial was legal illegal according to the Sanhedrin's own laws and regulations. According to Jewish law, all criminal trials must begin and end in the daylight. Therefore, though the decision to condemn Jesus was already made, they conducted a second trial in daylight, because they knew the first one, the real trial, had no legal standing. This was only one of many illegalities made in the trial of Jesus. According to Jewish law, only decisions made in the official meeting place were valid. The first trial was held at the home of Caiaphas, the high priest. According to Jewish law, criminal cases could not be tried during the Passover season. According to Jewish law, only an acquittal could be issued on the day of the trial. Guilty verdicts had to wait one night to allow for feelings of mercy to arise. According to Jewish law, all evidence had to be guaranteed by two witnesses, who were separately examined and could not have contact with each other. According to Jewish law, false witness was punishable by death. Nothing was done to the many false witnesses in Jesus' trial. According to Jewish law, a trial always began by bringing forth evidence for the innocence of the accused, before the evidence of guilt was offered. This was not the practice here. These were the Sanhedrin's own rules, and it is abundantly clear that in their eagerness to get rid of Jesus, they broke their own rules. Neither in the annals of history of the historian nor in the realm of fiction is there anything that can equal the degradation of the unholy trial, the base devices to find a charge to prefer against a prisoner, the illegal tricks to secure a verdict of guilty, which would ensure a death penalty. The council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. This is a remarkable testimony to the life and integrity of Jesus. For having lived such a public life and performed such a public ministry, it was difficult to find even false testimony against him. This fellow said, "I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." After all the false witnesses had their say, Jesus was finally charged with threatening to destroy the temple, as in a modern-day bomb threat. Clearly, Jesus said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." But this glorious prophecy of his resurrection was twisted into a terrorist threat. John 2:21 makes it clear that he was speaking of the temple of his body. Do answer nothing. Jesus sat silently until he was commanded by the office of the high priest to answer the accusations against him. Remarkably, Jesus kept silent and answered nothing until it was absolutely necessary in obedience for him to speak. Jesus could have mounted a magnificent defense here, calling forth all the various witnesses to his deity, power, and character. The people he taught, the people he healed, the dead risen, the blind who see, even the demons themselves testified to his deity. But Jesus opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Seeing the trial go badly, Caiaphas confronted Jesus, acting more as an accuser than an impartial judge. "I adjure you," is a rare and informal and formal expression for invoking the name of God in order to compel a true answer. This is therefore the climax of the hearing. The high priest, frustrated by Jesus' silence, tried a bold stroke that cut to the central issue. Was Jesus the Messiah, or was he not? It was a tacit confession that Christ had been proved innocent up until then. The high priest would not have needed to draw something out of the accused one if there had been sufficient material against him elsewhere. The trial had been a dead failure up to that point, and he knew it, and was red with rage. Now he attempts to bully the prisoner that he may extract some declaration from him, which may save all further trouble of witnesses and end the matter. It is as you said. Instead of defending himself, Jesus simply testified to the truth. He was indeed the Christ, the Son of God. He answered as briefly and directly as possible. "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power." Jesus added this one word of warning. He warned them that, though they sat in judgment of him now, he would one day sit in judgment of them, and with a far more binding judgment. of the power. Power is a typically Jewish reverential expression to avoid pronouncing the sacred name of God, which might have laid Jesus open to the charge of blasphemy, though ironically it was precisely that charge on which he was condemned. He has spoken blasphemy. The accusation of blasphemy would have been correct, except that Jesus was whom he said he was. It is no crime for the Christ, the Son of God, to declare who he really is. They spat in his face and beat him. They spit on him. They hit him with their fists. They slapped him with their open hands. It is easy to think that they did this because they didn't know who he was. That is true in one sense, because they would not admit to themselves that he was indeed the Messiah and the Son of God. Yet in another sense, it's not true at all, because by nature man is an enemy of God. For a long time, man waited to literally hit, slap, and spit in God's face. As these religious leaders vented their hatred, fear, and anger upon Jesus, spitting in his face and beating him, it was remarkable that the immediate judgment of God did not rain down from heaven. It was remarkable that a legion of angels did not spring to the defense of Jesus. This shows the amazing forbearance towards sin that God has and the staggering riches of his mercy. As one reads this story, one wonders more and more at the greatest miracle of all, the patient suffering of the spotless one. Yeah. That's for sure. Psalm 32, verses 1 through 11. How blessed is the one whose rebellious acts are forgiven, whose sin is pardoned. How blessed is the one whose wrongdoing the Lord does not punish, in whose spirit there is no deceit. When I refused to confess my sin, my whole body wasted away, while I groaned in pain all day long. For day and night you tormented me. You tried to destroy me in the intense heat of summer. Then I confessed my sin. I no longer covered up my wrongdoing. I said, I will confess my rebellious acts to the Lord, and then you forgave my sins. For this reason, every one of your faithful followers should pray to you while there is a window of opportunity. Certainly when the surging water rises, it will not reach them. You are my hiding place. You protect me from distress. You surround me with shouts of joy from those celebrating deliverance. I will instruct and teach you about how you should live. I will advise you as I look you in the eye. Do not be like an unintelligent horse or mule, which will not obey you unless they are controlled by a bridle and bit. An evil person suffers much pain, but the Lord's faithfulness overwhelms the one who trusts in him. Rejoice in the Lord and be happy, you who are godly. Shout for joy, all you who are morally upright. Yeah, this is a Psalm of David. Which I guess wasn't written at a specific occasion, but it certainly feels like it was written after some sin of David's. Which, you have the first verse here. How blessed is the one whose rebellious acts are forgiven, whose sin is pardoned. How blessed is the one whose wrongdoing the Lord does not punish, in whose spirit there is no deceit. These verses are quoted in Romans 4, where Paul is making a point that it's not by works of righteousness that we've done, but according to his mercy that we're saved. Because the law came after, essentially, grace was given to men. Yeah, but the types of sin that are listed here, rebellious acts, are sins which did not have a sacrifice associated with them. The sins that were given a sacrificed for in the Levitical law were sins of omission, not sins of commission. That is, sins done unintentionally, rather than the ones committed blatantly and rebelliously. Here David is falling on the grace and mercy of God, rather than saying, "Oh, I committed this sin, but here's this sacrifice in accordance with the law, and that gets me right with God." But no, it's how blessed is the one whose rebellious acts are forgiven, whose sin is pardoned, whose wrongdoing the Lord does not punish. So, yeah. It pleads the mercy of God rather than asserting that there is some reason for which God should pardon. And it's interesting, too, the following verses, "When I refused to confess my sin, my whole body wasted away, while I groaned in pain all day long." That is, the sin that David kept, he kept holding in without confessing it, keeping it, as it were, and rotting away as he did so. "Then I confessed my sin. I no longer covered up my wrongdoing. I said, I will confess my rebellious acts to the Lord, and then you forgave my sins." So, if we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and purify us from all unrighteousness. So, we should do so. "For this reason, every one of your faithful followers should pray to you while there is a window of opportunity. That is, seek God while he may be sought." And Hebrews pounds this point in further, that there's an opportunity now for each of us to seek God's mercy, that he's mercifully provided for us. And we should do so in the day when he has allowed himself to be found in this way. Because we won't always have this opportunity. "You are my hiding place. You protect me from distress. You surround me with shouts of joy from those celebrating deliverance." Yeah, and those who make God their defense won't be disappointed. Yeah. And then, "I will instruct and teach you about how you should live. I will advise you as I look you in the eye. Do not be like an unintelligent horse or mule, which will not obey unless they are controlled by a bridle and a bit." We should take advice because the Lord's given us intelligence to discern between good advice and bad advice. And we should rationally do that rather than having to be led around by bit and bridle. And finally, Proverbs chapter 8, verses 27 through 31. "When he established the heavens, wisdom was there. When he marked out the horizon over the face of the deep. When he established the clouds above. When the fountains of the deep grew strong. When he gave the sea his decree that the waters should not pass over his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him as a master craftsman, and I was his delight day by day, rejoicing before him at all times, rejoicing in the habitable part of the earth, and delighting in its people." Yeah. Wisdom was there from day one. The antiquity of wisdom has a real and practical application. If the whole created order is founded on God's wisdom, then to go against his wisdom is to go against all creation. When we belong to Jesus Christ and walk in his wisdom, all of creation works for us. If we rebel against his wisdom and will, things start to work against us, as Jonah discovered when he tried to run away from the Lord. He assigned to the sea its limit. Wisdom has in mind that the Creator established unalterable laws or ordinances that set the boundaries for the earth, that the hostile sea cannot transgress. The chaotic energy of